Pledge. Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce Dan McGonigle from the John Birch Society. I was good over here. You want to be in the camera or no? Oh, I get it. He doesn't come on the film, so exactly. I'd like on behalf of Oath Keepers of the John Birch Society, Dan McGonigle has been nice enough to put on a presentation for restoring the Constitution. So, with that said, Mr. McGonigle.
Thank you, Don. I'd like to thank Oath Keepers for the invite. Thank you. And the title of this presentation is Restoring the Necessary Enforcement of Our Constitution and Bill of Rights. My name is Dan McGonigle. I've been studying this issue for about 5 years now. I'm born and raised in the greater Boston area. Worked in building and construction for about 30 years, now retired, graduated with honors from Wentworth Institute of Technology, ran for state rep in '94. 2008, I heard a speech at Faneuil Hall by Dr. Edwin Vieira Jr. that got me interested in this subject. I was on Lexington Green on April 19, 2009. Volunteered for 6 months inside the State House in 2009, and we won a major constitutional battle against a very draconian public health emergency bill there. I spoke at a Connecticut Oath Keepers meeting in 2010, attended by Martha Dean, Stuart Rhodes, Al Shurtleff, Walter Reddy, Bob Schultz, John Fiedler, etc. 10 July 2010, I experienced a major personal event, followed immediately by spiritual awakening that continues on. I can give specifics on that later. I've immersed myself in Dr. Vieira's writings in specific aspects of American history and determined to focus specifically on restoring the power of the sword, the state's and the people's ultimate emergency power enumerated in the several militia clauses in the federal and state constitutions. In the Second and 10th Amendment, the 10th, which says in part, powers not delegated to the United States are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. I recognize, like the era, the disbanded institutions or missing links that are enumerated in colonial statutes and in our constitutions that are intended to bind us all together as we the people, the sovereign. Wrote my first book last year. Do I have a copy? Can I grab a copy? There we go. Thank you. Execute the laws to restore the republic. People at this meeting today get a 25% discount if they want to purchase one. I have a new website and blog, enforceourconstitution.com. I've also secured the domains executethelaws.com for my books, present and future, and I've also secured committeesofcorrespondence.org for the people to organize themselves, which I will discuss later. Those two last domains, they're under construction right now. I have about 38 to 40 slides, so I can only take on short point questions as we go. Please hold most questions and all long questions. I suggest write it down for after the presentation. This picture displayed earlier, before the presentation, is of historical artist Don Troy Arnie's painting titled Lexington Common, 19th of April, 1775. depicting the Lexington Militia Company on the town green in the early morning prior to the arrival and offensive attack by the advancing British regulars. There's a handout that I gave everybody. It's of quotes, specific quotes from the Unanimous Declaration, Constitution, the Bill of Rights. And I'm going to go through these very quickly. You can see I've highlighted certain words, certain very important words in blue bold. And I'll read them for you. Laws of nature and nature's God. This is the Unanimous Declaration. Inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The first draft of the Declaration now was called Life, Liberty, and Property, and they changed it. The pursuit of happiness has a wider meaning. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving just powers from the consent of the governed. That's the establishment of the people as the sovereign. That phrase right there. Governments instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. There being the government being us, we the people. The right of the people to alter, it is their right, it is their duty to provide new guides for their future security. Duty is a very important word. It's not in the Constitution anywhere, but we all have a duty, and that'll come up a little later. Okay, the Constitution for the United States of America, the preamble. We the people do ordain and establish this Constitution. This again establishes we the people as the sovereign power, the supreme power. And one of the purposes, the preamble states the purposes of the Constitution. One of the purposes that I focus on is provide for the common defense. And they'll be able to see, you'll hear a greater meaning to what that means. That'll come up a little later. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 1, the people of the several states. Not many people know about this phrase. It matches up with another phrase coming up below, the militia of the several states. In Article 1, Section 2, Clause 1, we have the people of the several states. So we have we the people, and we have the people of the several states. Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 1, Clause 4, Clause 15, Clause 16. Again, provide for the common defense. Now, in the preamble, provide for the common defense was a purpose. In Article 1, Section 8, these are powers. These are the 17 powers. Provide for the common defense is a power. Uniform rule of naturalization. I put that in there. That's off point with this presentation, but I threw that in there because the proposed amnesty is current news. And this phrase, uniform rule of naturalization, is the proof that amnesty would be unconstitutional. Uniform rule means one line, means everybody goes through the same procedure to become a U.S. citizen. No special treatment for anybody. That's the proof on that. Okay, back to the on-point subjects. Make rules for the government and regulation of the land and naval forces. I think I have to go down here. Let's see. Oh, no, I'm still here. Okay. Provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws. That's Clause 15. Provide for organizing, arming, disciplining the militia, training the militia. That's Clause 16. So Clause 15 is the performance clause, the enforcement clause. Clause 16, provide for organizing, arming, disciplining the militia, training the militia. That's the organizational clause, the command structure. Constitution continued. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2. Unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require. I'm going to go back in my Constitution. That's what I had highlighted. I'm going to go back into Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2. And put that phrase in context. Okay. Does anybody know what that phrase has to do with? We've all heard of the writ of habeas corpus. Privilege that people can petition for a writ when they're arrested and they're not charged. They can petition for a writ to be released if they're not charged. So the whole section says the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended. And then my highlighting is unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion of public safety may require. So you're going to see this word invasion. This word invasion is 4 or 5 times throughout the Constitution. Invasion, invaded, public safety, imminent danger, public danger. These are all related to, implicitly related to the subject matter at hand. Article 1, Section 10, Clauses 1 and 3. No state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender and payment of debt. This is the power of the purse. And currently not in operation. Commonwealth of Massachusetts, where we are, if they were operating constitutionally regarding this clause, all employees, all contractors with the state, all contracts, those are debts. Okay? Employee salaries, contract payments, those would be debts. And this Constitution says they need to be tendered in payment of gold and silver constitutional money. And so one of the reasons for restoring the enforcement of the Constitution is that when that will happen, one of the first things, the second thing right after that, what will happen is they will enforce this clause in the Constitution. And constitutional money will be restored in the state that does it first, second state, second, and so forth and so on. And the beauty of that is that there's no inflation with gold and silver. It stays at a level value all the time. As opposed, so what will happen is, if you're going shopping or whatever, what have you, go into a business and to purchase some products or services, there will be 2 prices. There will be gold and silver price, and there will be a Federal Reserve note price. And the citizens and the consumers will be able to make a choice. Do they want to do business in gold and silver, or do they want to do business in the Federal Reserve note? And over time, the Federal Reserve note will lose value, which it's doing right now, because the quantitative easing, printing of money, is continuing on and on. And the petrodollar is being slowly walked away from by other countries in the world who all trade. Since Bretton Woods, have all been trading in petrodollar. So that's going to cause inflation. And gold and silver, there won't be any inflation. Everything will be stable. So that's the power of the purse. Clause 3, no state shall engage in war unless actually invaded or in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay. So a state, in an extreme circumstance or emergency like that, if a state is invaded, they can't go to war. But if Massachusetts was invaded, say, like that TV show, The Vikings. There's a Vikings TV show on cable. And they've been going over to England and they've been invading. Let's say somebody came into Boston Harbor and invaded. Say the Chinese Costco freight big ship, instead of full of products, it was full of 5,000 Chinese troops. So they invaded. So what do the Massachusetts people do? How do they repel that invasion? Well, I don't know. How do we? Do we have a militia that every able-bodied person belongs to? No, we don't. Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1, the militia of the several states. That's under Article 2 is the executive power under the President. And I may as well read that section. And if Vieira talked about this, he set forth a scenario where what he would do if he was president, what would happen if he was in the Oval Office. The President shall be Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and of the militia of the several states when called into actual service of the United States. So the militia is not of it's of the several states, but it can be called into service of the United States in an emergency when needed. Now, the reason these clauses are in here, that the militia of the several states, they do have, when you're done, you understand, when I'm done here, you understand that the militia have the enumerated duty, and power, and responsibility of domestic security. DHS doesn't have it, FEMA doesn't have it, and international man-made disaster. According to the Constitution, it's the militia of the several states, we the people, all able-bodied, in command structures. Okay. Article 4, Section 4. Right here. The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government. Okay, that's your constitutional republic right there. And shall protect each of them against invasion. Well, it's the southern border protected right now. California, Arizona, Mexico, Texas. No, it isn't. Shall protect each other against invasion and against domestic violence, which would, another word for that would be rebellion, insurrection, such as things that are going on right now by the men in suits in Washington, D.C. and New York City. That is, they are participating in ongoing rebellion and ongoing insurrection. Okay. Article 5, which you talked about the last meeting. Here we go, Article 5. I don't know if Hal mentioned this at the last meeting. When I mentioned it, when I went around with Hal Shirtliff, the John Birch Society for the 6th New England State House, we're gonna this week up we covered with me Albany at the New York State House. Hal brings me on after he talks, when I talk about the enforcement. Dr. Vieira wrote a short commentary. Enforcement, not amendment, is the answer. And so he's against a constitutional convention, conference of the states, whatever they want to call it. So this, I mentioned, and very few people pick up on it, but this is the only restriction in Article 5 against amending, against any amendment of the Constitution. It's at the end, the last sentence. This is up higher, there's words in between that are expired at a certain date, like 20 years after the Constitution was written. And then, so, when you read it without that, it says, provided that no state without consent shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate. What that means for the young fellow in the back there, equal suffrage, all that means is, equal suffrage in the Senate means we have 2 U.S. senators per state. That's the equal suffrage. We have 2. 2 for every state. Can't have 1 from one state, and then 2 from another state, and then 3 from another state. It's always the same equal number, so that's what they mean by equal suffrage. U.S. senators who were supposed to represent the interests, originally they were intended to represent the interests of the states. That was the whole purpose So they had equal number from each state. So when they voted on anything in the Senate, each one had a vote for their state. So that's the equal suffrage. So no state, like Texas, can't outvote Rhode Island because even though one's much bigger than the other, they both have 2 U.S. senators. So that's the only restriction on amending the Constitution, whether it's done in Congress, or whether it's done in convention, which is only once in 1787. So what does that mean? Anybody, as far as what can happen in a convention, if that's the only restriction, anybody want to offer what they think would happen in a convention? What's the danger of a convention? It could be runaway.
Actually, you could actually throw the entire Constitution away.
Right.
That's what they ended up doing with the...
This is the only restriction, that would mean everything else could be changed.
Right. But just like the Articles of Confederation that our founding fathers, they're just laid on.
Right.
Same exact thing.
Yeah. Okay, moving forward. Article 6, Clause 2. This Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, shall be the supreme law of the land. All right, here's the supremacy clause, where federal government can come into a state, like the FBI can come in and tell the state police in Massachusetts what to do, because of the supremacy clause. But that's not really true. The FBI is a really constitutional agency, but it's practice. And this is the proof that the Constitution is the supreme law. And like when Obama and the President and the Secretary of State signed the United Nations Small Arms Treaty, they claim that treaty can be applied as law in the United States. They want it to be applied as law. But laws and treaties are a level under the Constitution. This is the proof as far as the law. Now, the treaties are mentioned in this clause, in this section. But I'm not concerned with treaties, I'm concerned with laws. So, if the laws have to be made in pursuance thereof being the Constitution, which one supersedes which? It doesn't say the Constitution has to be made in pursuance thereof of the laws. It says the laws of the United States which shall be made in pursuance thereof. So the laws are under the Constitution. Even though when people read it, they think the Constitution, the laws, and the treaty are all together the supreme law. But if you read it correctly, that's the proof that the Constitution is the superseding rule. Okay.
Also lays the foundation for modification as well.
Right. Bill of Rights. We all know of the Second Amendment. Well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Important phrase that I'm dealing with is well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The meaning of that will become clear a little later. And the people in the Second Amendment, the people in the Fourth Amendment, the people in the 10th Amendment, and as I mentioned before, we have we the people, and we have people in several states. And I'm asserting, and I'm proving that we the people are the sovereign because of the Declaration and because of the Constitution's preamble. That's the proof that we are the sovereign. Now, in the olden days, the king in England, he was the sovereign, but that got replaced in our form of government. We the people were put in, not the president, but the people are put in as the sovereign. Fourth Amendment, right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects. Fifth Amendment, except in cases arising in the land and naval forces or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger. I don't think many people know the the militia is even mentioned in the Fifth Amendment, but there it is. And I'm going to read, because this has to do with martial law too, like about the habeas corpus. Fifth Amendment, I use this as proof that martial law can only be applied to the military and the militia, not to the public at large. Okay. No person shall be held to answer for, et cetera, various crimes, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. So, if you're in the land or naval forces or in the militia in time of in actual service, in time of war or public danger, a person can be held. Which is martial law. The military is martial law, different from the civilian law. And then, of course, the Fifth Amendment goes into shall not be deprived of life or the property without due process of law. Okay, 10th Amendment, very important. And unfortunately, there's a group called the 10th Amendment Center that I can't get them to come on board with what I'm talking about, what Dr. Veer is talking about, enforcing the first clause of the Second Amendment and all the enforcement clauses in the Constitution. They don't want to talk about it. I approached personally Michael Bolden, I approached Tom Woods, the Notified Now Tour of Manchester, New Hampshire. They didn't want to talk about it. I had Dr. Veer's book in my hand. They didn't want to talk about it. They're too busy. So the 10th Amendment, the powers not delegated to the United States are reserved, leaving out some language, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. For what are they? So, the Bill of Rights, what are we doing talking about powers in the Bill of Rights? Well, there's two places there are powers in the Bill of Rights. In the Second Amendment, the first clause of the Second Amendment, law and regulation being necessary to the security of free state, that's a power. That's a militia power. It's necessary for security to ensure security and freedom in a state. And then we have the 10th Amendment says powers not delegated to the United States. Now, it's the militia of the several states. It's not the militia of the United States. So that's power reserved to the states because it's of the several states, and it's also reserved to the people because the people compose, the body of the people compose the militia, and that's from the colonial statutes, and it's from, I'm going to read a section of the Virginia Bill of Rights where it spells that out specifically. All right. Intro. Restoring enforcement of the Constitution's Bill of Rights is the single most important project of the 21st century. Government operations have been and continue running afoul of the laws. Government occupiers have been and continue running amok. The design and mandates of the founding documents are not being adhered to. Enforcing our Constitution is the solution. Also recognized by Dr. Lumia Jr., the John Birch Society, and writers at the New American Magazine, who have been writing about and preaching about enforcement of the Constitution for years. That then begs the question, how do we go about restoring necessary constitutional enforcement, constitutional security, and constitutional money? This isn't something not yet discovered. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. The solution is right there in black and white in the founding documents. The enumerated but repugnantly disbanded missing link that's intended to bind we the people together as the sovereign is the solution that needs restoration. Militia institutions, enumerated colonial laws, pre-constitutional colonial laws, and federal state constitutions for necessary security and its governance will again provide a remedy. The remedy to restore America is to assert political principles and restore enforcement following the Founders' Lead and Instruction Book. Okay, I put together a chronology from the beginning in America as far as the visitors that came over from Europe and started up plantations. Chronology of government operations, events, and political philosophy. 1631, General Report of Massachusetts Bay Colony orders that all adult males are to possess arms. Local town militia established based on the English system. So this is 11 years after 1620, Plymouth Plantation began. 24 years after Jamestown, Virginia. 1636, Northeast and South Militia Regiments formed the Massachusetts Bay Colony by order of the General Court. The Plymouth Colony was in the southeast of our state now. Massachusetts Bay was up around the Boston area in the North Shore. And so they formed 3 militia regiments in 1636. And ironically, the National Guard and the Department of Defense have gone to extreme measures to claim a certain date, 1636. In Salem, Massachusetts, where the Northeast and South Militia Regiments were formed, they claim that as their founder. And with the National Guard, which was created by the 1903 Militia Act, the National Guard, instead, they're claiming that they were founded in 1636 in Salem, Massachusetts. And they passed laws in Congress, they passed laws in the Massachusetts legislature. It's all over. You type in militia, 1636 Massachusetts. It's all, the first 3 pages on Google will be, every single one will be the National Guard. And I'll talk about that later. Just as a side issue on that particular subject, this is a book published by Congress, and it's available on Amazon. The Right to Keep and Bear Arms, report of the Subcommittee on the Constitution, United States Senate, 97 Congress. This was published in 1982. Orrin Hatch was on the committee, Ted Kennedy was on the committee, and it says that the last couple of paragraphs in the report that the National Guard is not a militia. So you're hearing different stories. You're seeing this, and then you're seeing the DOD and National Guard marketing. And so people can be confused about what's the straight dope. 1643. The Articles of Confederation of the United Colonies of New England, a.k.a. the New England Confederation. So this is in my book. I have an excerpt in my book from an original document published by the Old South Meeting House in Boston. I think it's from 1906, and I have a picture of the original document, certain excerpts from that document. And what I'm going to read here is included in my book. It included Massachusetts, Plymouth, as I mentioned before, Connecticut, New Haven, which were separate colonies. It was for the mutual defense and safety. Excerpt from the Articles of Confederation. 1643. The charge of all just wars, whether offensive or defensive, upon what part or member of this confederation soever they fall, shall both in men, provisions, and all other dispersions be borne by all the parts of this confederation. The commissioners for each jurisdiction bring a true account in number of all their males, every man, in every plantation from 16 years old to 60. So 16 to 60, all males were part of this mutual defense and safety agreement that they made between these 4 colonies. Okay, so that's again the body of the people. That's more proof that we all are supposed to be part of this state institution. 1651, British philosopher Thomas Hobbes, very famous, wrote a book called The Leviathan. In poli-sci, an undergraduate in college, poli-sci 101, a couple of the first 2 gentlemen that they come across, that get taught in that course, you learn about Thomas Hobbes, British philosopher, and you also learn about John Locke, who I'm going to mention a little just after this. And So Thomas Hobbes, 1651, wrote the Leviathan, published the Leviathan. Leviathan is the state, or the Commonwealth. That's the Leviathan. Back cover. And my copy is right here. And these excerpts are from this. This is the Leviathan, Thomas Hobbes. The back cover of this book says, to prevent total destruction, reason must prevail in those in the pre-political state of nature. Pre-political, no government, no laws. Pre-political state of nature must collectively acknowledge the creation of a civil authority as the only solution if peace is to be achieved and self-preservation assured. Now, I have a comment in here. Before even getting into the U.S. Constitution, which I will very soon, we can see from Hobbes in 1651 that the alleged private militia without civil authority, which a lot of people claim, I see it on the internet and on Facebook all the time, that argument is found lacking legitimacy, just from that one statement that Thomas Hobbes made. Because the people that are alleging that private groups are militia, but what is this civil authority? What laws are they acting under? They're acting what Hobbes called the pre-political state of nature. That's where they are. There's no civil authority, and there's no written civil regulations, local, county, state, whatever. So that's why I don't agree with private groups using that term, because I like it. When I talk about militia, it's always the Constitution. Okay, quote, hereby it is manifest that during the time men lived without a common power to keep them all in awe, they are in that condition which is called war. In such a war as is of every man against every man, and continual spies upon their neighbors. We've heard that recently, haven't we? NSA come to mind? And continual spies upon their neighbors, which is a posture of war.
Yes.
Where there is no common power, there is no law. The only way to erect such a common power is may be able to defend them from the invasion and the injuries of one another, and thereby to secure them in such sort as that by their own industry and by the fruits of the earth they may nourish themselves and live contentedly, which is the origin of property. The fruits of your labor, what you make is your property, is to confer all their power and strength upon one man or upon one assembly of men. A multitude so united in one person is called a commonwealth. Common power, common wealth. In our case, the one man, at that time, there was a king of England. That's the one man. Here, where we're supposed to be the common power. The one man or king. Here's my addition in here. Let's see. Quote. The only way. Okay, next page. Commonwealth. Here it is. Let me know if I read beyond the page, because I'll forget. I'll forget to change the page. The one man a king, in that case, was the sovereign. In our form of government, we people are the sovereign. So the people are intended to wield the ultimate common power. Quote, and because the end of this institution is the peace and defense of them all, and whosoever has right to the end has right to the means. It belongeth of right to whatsoever man or assembly that hath the sovereignty, to be judge both of the means of peace and defense, and to do whatever he shall think necessary to be done, both beforehand for the preserving of peace and security, and when peace and security are lost, for the recovery of the same. The command of the militia, without other institution, maketh him that hath it sovereign. Ed Hobbs talked about the militia when I first found it in his book. Whoever has the command of the militia is the sovereign. So we the people are composed of militia, and we elect our officers. We are in ultimate charge of the militia. So the command of the militia that's us. More proof that we the people are the sovereign. It had already been shown that the whole militia or forces of the Commonwealth is annexed to the sovereign. Saying essentially the same thing again. Sovereign, if he transfers the militia, he retains the judicature in vain. If he transfers or gives it away, he retains the judicature in vain for want of execution of the laws. So he's transferring the militia away from the sovereign power. You're wanting means you're wanting of execution of the laws. You're lacking execution of the laws. So we see that. This is my argument. Because there is no militia in operation, we are lacking in proper execution of constitutional laws. Every sovereign has the same right in procuring the safety of his people that any particular man can have in procuring the safety of his own body. And I have in parentheses there. Do I have that? No, I don't have it. I don't have it on that. But what I wrote here, my copy, I wrote common power and individual right. Similar to the two clauses of the Second Amendment. The sovereign has the right to procure the safety of the people, the same as the individual procuring the safety of his own body. That's the second part of the right to keep and bear arms. The sovereign has the right to procuring the safety of his people. That's the first part. Well, they agree with those being necessary to the security of a free state. Oh, I heard that. Common power. Here's my comment. Common power and individual rights similar to the two clauses of the Second Amendment. Okay. All right. Here we go with John Locke. John Locke, second treatise on civil government. And I have John Locke here, second treatise on civil government. It's not too long. This book's only 130 pages. 1690, British philosopher John Locke. I'm guessing that Locke, when he wrote the second treatise, he may consider this Leviathan to be the first treatise. That's just a guess on my part. They were only, 39 years apart in the publication. Section 13. God hath certainly appointed government to restrain the violence of men. I easily grant that civil government is the proper remedy for the inconvenience of the state of nature. State of nature is mentioned by Hobbes. No man in civil society can be exempted from the laws of it. I have never yet found any person so great a patron of anarchy as to affirm. In other words, he hasn't found anybody who promotes anarchy to agree with what he said. Man seeks out and is willing to join society with others for the mutual preservation of the lives, liberties, and estates, which I call the general name, property. The great and chief end. Therefore, men uniting into commonwealths and putting themselves under government is the preservation of their property. That goes back to the purpose mentioned in the Constitution's preamble, the provide for the common defense. 131. The part of society or legislative legislative constituted by them is obliged to secure everyone's property. Whoever has the legislative or supreme power of any commonwealth is bound to govern by established standing laws, promulgated and known to the people, and not by extemporary decrees. And to employ the force of the community at home only in the execution of such laws, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15, which I quoted before from the Constitution, and secure the community from inroads and invasion. That's in Clause 15. And all this to be directed to no other end but the peace, safety, and public good of the people. Section 134. Great end of men's entering into society, being the enjoyment of their properties of peace and safety, and the great instrument and means of that being the laws established in that society. The law of nature stands as an eternal rule for all men, legislators, as well as others. The rules that they make for other men's actions must, as well as their own and other men's actions, be conformable to the law of nature, i.e., to the will of God. 144. Because the laws have a constant lasting force and need a perpetual execution, therefore it is necessary that there should be a power always in being which should see to the execution of the laws. Now, when I mention the laws, I'm only talking about constitutional laws. Article 6, Clause 2, laws made pursuant thereof, Constitution. As far as I'm concerned, a law that's not constitutional is no law at all, and that's well documented. Okay, and thus the legislative and executive power come often to be separated. 219. Where the laws cannot be executed, it is all such as today. It is all one as if there were no laws. And a government without laws is a mystery in politics, unconceivable to human capacity, and inconsistent with human society. Society can never, by the fault of another, lose the original right it has to preserve itself, which can only be done by a settled legislative and a fair and impartial execution of the laws made by it. Men can never be secure from tyranny if there be no means to escape it till they are perfectly under it. And therefore it is that they have not only a right to get out of it, but to prevent it. 221. The legislative acts against the trust reposed in them when they endeavor to invade property and to make themselves masters or arbitrary disposers of the lives, liberties, or fortunes of the people. So it's the same. The legislative acts against the trust when it does these other things here. When it acts against the lives, liberties, and properties. So there's supposed to be a trust. The people are supposed to have a certain trust in the legislative governance. 222. The reason why men enter into society is the preservation of their property. In the end, why they choose and authorize the legislative is that there may be laws made and rules set as guards and fences to the properties of all the members of society. It can never be supposed to be the will of the society that the legislative should have a power to destroy that which everyone designs to secure. Whenever legislators endeavor to take away and destroy the property of the people, or to reduce them to slavery under arbitrary power, they put themselves into a state of war with the people. Hobbes said the same thing, which we quoted that before. By this breach of trust, they forfeit the power the people had put into their hands for quite contrary ends, and it devolves to the people. The power, the legislative, the government's power devolves to the people, who have a right to resume their original liberty and provide for their own safety and security, which is the end for which they are in society. We mentioned that before. So, I'm going to mention soon, I'm going to mention what happened in Massachusetts in 1774. This exact thing happened 2 years before the Declaration of Independence. The people of Massachusetts Bay and other colonies, the people literally took over the government, took it away from the crown appointed officials. 226. This doctrine of power in the people of providing for their safety anew when their legislators have acted contrary to their trust by invading their property is the best defense against rebellion. In the probable, this means to hinder it, for rebellion being in opposition, not to persons but to authority, which is founded only in the constitutions and laws of the government. Authority is founded in the constitutions. Rebellion is against the authority. Those, whoever they be, who by force break through and by force justify the violation of them, the constitutions and laws, are truly and properly rebels. What I mentioned before, in Washington, D.C. and New York City, rebellion and insurrection, right? 226. Okay, continue with law. 233. Must men alone be debarred the common privilege of opposing force with force. I'll read that again. Must men alone be debarred or prevented the common privilege of opposing force with force, which nature allows so freely with all other creatures for their preservation from injury? Question mark. I answer. Why? Self-defense is a part of the law of nature. The people have a right to resist and defend themselves from injury. 240. Who shall be judged whether the prince or legislative act contrary to their trust? Question mark. To this I reply, the people shall be the judge. 243. The people have provided a legislator with power, but when by the miscarriages of those in authority it is forfeited upon the forfeiture or at the termination of the time set and reversed through the society, the people have a right to act as supreme. And continue the legislative in themselves, or erect a new form, or under the old form, place it in new hands, as they think good. Now this sounds very, very similar. You read the Declaration of Independence, you read that, and you read the Declaration of Independence. Very, very similar in words. My example, summer and fall, I mentioned before, 74 in the provinces, and then again, July 4th, 1776, in the colonies acting as one. Colonies acting as one did this July 4th. And each of the 13 provinces did it in 1774 as individual governments. All right, 1723, Virginia Militia Act. King George I. An act for the settling and better regulation of the militia. I'm not going to read this whole thing. I don't want it to be too dry, but I will read the underline, the emphasis that I put in there. Regulation of militia is absolutely necessary for the defense of the country. Again, this is Virginia Militia 1723. All free male persons whatsoever from 21 years to 60 years of age within this respective county to serve in horse or foot, needs infantry or cavalry. 1757, King George II enacts for the better regulating and disciplining of the militia. Again, this is Virginia. And I underline county lieutenant. County lieutenant was the top militia officer in the county. But in the county command structure, they also had the colonel, lieutenant colonel, and other inferior officers. But I wanted to mention I underlined the county lieutenant here because it's an odd title. That came from, there was a title in England called the Lord Lieutenant of the county. The county lieutenant came from the Lord Lieutenant. It has nothing to do with the lieutenant under a captain. It's a different thing. Okay, Part 2, shall list all male persons above the age of 18 years and under the age of 60. Within this colony, under the command of such captain as he shall think fit. And I mentioned the county sheriff. These are my comments. The county sheriff is mentioned in several places in this statute of 1757, but it is not relative to militia command. It's relative to collections of fines and levies imposed on delinquents in the militia. In other words, if you didn't fail to show up for muster, or you showed up without the proper arms and coolers, there was in the statute there are fines, specific fines for each violation, and depending in every different rank of officer, they have specific responsibilities. Okay. 1765 to 1770. They were rebelling against the Stamp Act in the 1760s. And they had a Stamp Act Congress convened in New York City Hall. And from those dates, in October. And the Stamp Act was repealed at that time, after that Congress. That was repealed in England. Let's see. Stamp Act Congress Declaration of Rights and Grievances. That was a document they issued, a political declaration. 1765 to 1769. Blackstone's Commentaries on the Laws of England. This is book 1 of Blackstone's, and there was another commentary written, Tucker's 1803, Blackstone's Commentaries. Tucker's 1803 is in my book of Blackstone's, and what Tucker did, he took the exact Blackstone's commentaries, and then he added his comments where Blackstone's matched with the U.S. Constitution and the Virginia Constitution. Tucker was from Virginia. St. S.T. George Tucker is his full name. So that's what's in my book. George Tucker's Blackstone's. And it was recommended by Dr. Vieira in a meeting I had with him. He recommended in my section in here on martial law, he recommended that I include something from Blackstone's, and that's what I did. See part of Tucker's 1803 Blackstone's my book, blah, blah, blah. Put Master Tucker, matched, okay, I said that. Let's see, this is quote from Tucker. In the land of liberty and free states, no man should take up arms, but with a view to defend his country and its laws. It is because he is a citizen and would wish to continue so that he makes himself for a while a soldier. Tucker matches Blackstone, I mentioned that. And this matches up with the militia clauses 15 and 16, Article 1, Section 8. It also matches up, what Tucker said there, with Webster's 1828. No, Webster's 1828 definition of militia, which I have in here, and you can see the common language. 5th of March, 1770, Boston Massacre. June 10th. Anybody from Rhode Island knows about this. Rhode Island Patriots burned the ground in HMS Gaspee, which had been interfering and harassing private shipping in Rhode Island. 2 November, Boston Town Meeting, pushed by Samuel Adams, forms a committee of correspondence. The initial purpose of the committee was to prepare a statement, quote, prepare a statement of the rights of the colonists and of this province, in particular as men, as Christians, and as subjects. Prepare a declaration of the infringement of these rights and prepare a letter to be sent to all the towns of this province and to the world, giving a sense of this town. They did that. 20 November, Boston Committee Correspondence issues report, The Rights of the Colonists, primarily by Samuel Adams. Now that was distributed throughout the colonies, and a copy was sent to Benjamin Franklin, who was an ambassador to England at the time, 1772. Franklin had it published in the London newspapers. They thought Franklin wrote it, and Franklin published it, but it was Samuel Adams and the committee that wrote it, and that report. And basically the report And the report is in my, excerpts from the report are in my book too. Again, I think it's two copies, one from the City of Boston records and one from the Old South Meeting House. It had two sections above. I'll repeat what it said. Prepare a statement of rights. And then prepare a declaration of the infringement of those rights. So what does that sound like? Something that happened on July 4th?
Yeah, exactly. They're starting is what they're starting.
Prepare a statement of the rights, and then prepare a declaration of the infringement of those rights. Yeah. Okay, committees of correspondence were formed. This is me. Throughout the colonies by county local governments. The same is necessary today. 1773, 1774, 1716 Boston Tea Party. After negotiations failed on what to do with the British monopoly keep sitting on British ships in the Boston Harbor. I have a book about Sam Adams. A couple of weeks they were in negotiations. They couldn't come to an agreement, so Boston Tea Party happened. March to June. British Parliament's coercive acts, commonly called intolerable acts, which are the response to the Boston Tea Party. Closed the port of Boston, British control of Massachusetts and county government, control limited, restricted town meetings by the British Army, quartering British soldiers in people's homes. Early September, reported in the newspapers that local Crown officials appointed per the Mass Government Act, which was part of the coercive acts, suggested disarming the people of Boston. General Gage and Governor Gage, he had two positions. Gage had already ordered seizure of all gunpowder. 1 September, before dawn, Gage's redcoat sailed up the Mystic River, seized hundreds of barrels of powder from the Charlestown powerhouse. Rumor was spread that the British were bombarding Boston. That was a rumor. They weren't bombarding Boston. The next couple of days, though, 2 or 3 September, the powder alarm. Between 20,000 and 100,000 militiamen estimated to have marched towards Boston. From all over New England, New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, they all were coming when the rumor spread that Boston was being bombarded. 5 September, First Column of Congress convenes in Philadelphia. September 74. 6 September, Worcester County Convention. Right here. Estimated between 4,600 to 6,000 unarmed militiamen take over county government. They took over the courthouse. Elections of militia officers were ordered. The militia officers at that time, they had commissions from the Crown appointed officials. They ordered those commissions deleted, and they wanted everybody to be elected by their militiamen. August to October, every county courthouse in Massachusetts Bay Colony or Massachusetts Bay Province taken over by the people. And Crown appointed officials were forced out, except Suffolk County, which was under control of the British Army in Boston. 9 September, Suffolk County resolves passed in county convention meeting outside Boston. The Suffolk resolves delivered to Philadelphia by Paul Revere on horseback. It took them about a week and approved by Continental Congress December 17th. This is a quote from the resolves. Number 11, we therefore, for the honor, defense, and security of this county and province, advise, be elected as officers in the militia, that the inhabitants appear under arms at least once every week. Number 16, demand that a provincial congress be called. That's the Suffolk County resolves. There's a house, Suffolk resolves house, I think it's in Dedham or Milton, I'm not sure which one it is. 5 October, elected representatives convene in Salem to be sworn in, newly elected. Representatives were the lower house of the general court. The upper house, they were appointed. Governor Gage or his representative failed to show as required to swear in the elected representatives. 2 days later, 7 October, representatives Gathered in Salem, resolved to form a provincial congress, what that was being demanded in the counties. I have a section in my book, and I have a 900-page journal. It's called the 1774-1775 Journal of Provincial Congress and the Massachusetts Committee of Safety. And a lot of what's in my book is right from that journal. And so they formed a provincial congress, and we're going to go into that detail right now. Yep. If you want. Yeah, sure. Anybody want to take a break? You guys want to take a break? Camera? Yeah. Thank you. Oh, shut the camera off.
So yes, we are?
Certainly.